It's good to be back with you. I am actually on the other side of Thanksgiving break, and I had an awesome week off. I hope you did as well. I had a good time with my family and got a nice little cold. So my goal is to not sniff and snort through this podcast. I did, while I was off, get to go to this Andrew Peterson Behold the Lamb of God concert. Got to meet a couple of young people who listen to Guided by Faith. So Kai and Judah, if you're listening, it's good to have met you this week and hope you have an awesome week. Speaking of having an awesome week, I, at the end of the year, each year, really do end up spending a lot of time trying to look through the past year and decide, was this a good year? Was it a bad year? And that got me thinking that this would be a really good discussion for us to have. And we're actually going to have a couple of weeks to talk about this because I want you to be able to really evaluate properly how your life is going, how your year is going, but also to realize that you have some real choice in the matter. And over the last few weeks, actually the last couple of months, I have spent a lot of time in a book of the Bible that you maybe haven't spent much time in. It's called Ecclesiastes. It's in the Old Testament. It's one of the wisdom literature books. So you've got Job, Psalms, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes. And the author of Ecclesiastes does exactly what we're talking about. Traditionally, the author is Solomon, King Solomon, who was allegedly the wisest man that ever lived. Bible times, he was definitely the wisest man, but I feel like he made a lot of dumb decisions too. But he was evaluating his life at the end of his life, and he's got some stuff to share with us that I think will be helpful. So I want to encourage you guys, just, first off, thinking in your life and year, has it been a good year for you? Would you consider this to be a good year? And then ultimately, my question is, how do you determine whether it was a good year? How do you decide whether it was a good year? When you decide whether it's a good year, you start thinking about that. If you pile those up together, that ends up determining whether you had a good life or not. Is a good life just, I had more good years than bad years? Is a good life, I had one exceptional year and that made up for it? These are questions that people have. And they're questions that you're going to have, like, how do I evaluate whether my life mattered or not? In Ecclesiastes, you're going to see, like, right from the very beginning, this book could be like an emo song, because Solomon, the teacher, he's known as the teacher in this book, he really has some harsh evaluation for life right from the very beginning. So Ecclesiastes 1, let me read a little bit to you of how it starts off. The words of the teacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Meaningless, says the teacher, meaningless, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What does a man gain from all his labor at which he toils under the sun? There's other translations that say vanity, vanity of vanities. Everything I've done is vanity. If you want to get into details, in chapter 2, he says, I undertook great projects. I built a house for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks, planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs and water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves. I had other slaves who were born in my house. I owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. This guy was mega rich and lived in a time where, I'm thankful this isn't the case today, but you could even buy, bondservants. You could buy slaves in your house, and he did that. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired men and women singers and a harem as well, the delights of the heart of men. I became far greater than anyone in Jerusalem before me, and in all my wisdom stayed with me. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my work, and this was the reward for all my labor. And yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was to be gained under the sun. It's interesting because as I read this to you, I feel like I have heard the same kind of thing said from people who chase the ladder of success in our culture. People who work and slave to build some kind of empire, and then they get to the end of their lives and they realize, I can't take any of this with me. I sacrificed relationships along the way, and there's nothing to be gained from it. So that word meaningless that he says over and over again, the word is translated vanity, I think, in the English Standard Version, meaningless in the NIV. The actual Hebrew word is not meaningless and it's not vanity. It's vapor. And I think that's a really cool thing to think about. Your life is a vapor, and everything that you put yourself to is a vapor. You might work very, very hard at it. You might be slaving away at school or at a side job or at a hobby, but ultimately it's a vapor. That stuff is going to vanish. It's going to go away. And so what Solomon found is in trying to put his hope, trying to put his identity, even trying to put his ultimate satisfaction in life with the building and the accomplishing and the creating and the building of an empire. It just felt like a vapor because he wasn't going to take it with him. He was going to leave it to somebody else. Who knows how they were going to use it. And he really became despondent. And I feel like there's a lot of people that we're surrounded by that are looking around at life. And maybe this is you. You say, life is just meaningless. What does it matter if I do anything, if I work hard in any of this? Now, we're going to unpack this over a couple of weeks, but I feel like I need to give you a fast forward right now. Ultimately, let me tell you this. The teacher doesn't end in vanity and futility. What he ultimately says is this: behold, what I've seen is it's good and fitting to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun, the few days of his life that God has given him, for this is his lot. Everyone to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them, they should accept their lot and rejoice in his toil. This is the gift of God. So ultimately, what we're going to unpack this week is that your life is a vapor, but the opportunities in your life are a gift from God. The relationships in your life, the ability to work, the ability to build things. It's kind of like you go to the beach, you build a sandcastle, it's going to wash away, but there's an enjoyment in the building. And if you feel like everything you're building is for an empire for this earth, you're going to feel futile. Why? Because life apart from God leads to despair. And your life apart from God leads to despair. But true joy and purpose come from recognizing that life is a gift from God. And so as we just begin this week, we're going to really tease this out over a couple of weeks of how to measure the great life, not just the good life, but it first and foremost comes with you realizing that life apart from God truly is meaningless, and that joy and purpose come from recognizing that your life is a gift from God, especially the gift of Jesus Christ. So I'm going to share this more and more as the week goes on, but I hope today, if you're looking around and feeling like things are meaningless, you realize that today and the opportunities of today are a gift from God, and you need to make the most of them.